I've got no idea where to start with this game, so I'm just gonna take it from the top. You're dropped off on some hillside road overlooking some kind of techno city, which is either from the far future or it's just modern day Japan, but considering the fact that we can see the Aurora Borealis, it's safe to assume that this is the 2077 version of Oulu. Now hopefully that has set the tone for what kind of game this is. Spoilers, it's a weird one. Not weird in a bad way like Uayeb, and not weird in an outdated way like Alone in the Dark, but rather weird in a very intentional and very good way. I'll elaborate more on that in just a second, but let's get a little rundown on what the story is. So after being dropped on this road, you're told to go and get a room at the Hotel Norwood, where you can do your job. Now you may ask, what is your job? I don't know. But you know what? I don't need to know, because this game's story, setting, and atmosphere exist in that wonderful area between standard dream and horrendous nightmare, where everything makes sense, because nothing makes sense. I've criticized this kind of setup before, like in The Ball, where you fall into the mine and you're told to go and solve puzzles, but I love it here, because like I said, this is like a dream. You don't need setup, things just happen and you accept it, that's the way it's meant to be. There's not even a main menu for this game, you just get the splash screens and then bam, you're into it. So we're told to go to a hotel, so we start going to the hotel, and the journey has all the things you would expect. It's got the unicycle couple, the Illuminati apple, the massive turtle, and the screaming stone effigies. So, just the standard stuff. And when you reach the hotel, you get to bask in its somewhat unique architecture. It's really going for that barnyard cathedral fortress feel. I imagine this is what East Germans thought West Germany looked like. So in this weird and wacky world, what kind of conversations are you expecting people to have? Probably some wacky, absurd banter and fantastical hyperbole. Well, that's not what you're getting, because most of the people you run into are having extremely grounded, if not straight up dull conversations. And that's because this game isn't trying to be your standard branch of strange, it's trying, and completely succeeding, to be surreal. Now the word surreal is tossed around way too much these days and is often misused. Many people seem to use it as simply a synonym for the word strange, and while that's not necessarily incorrect, surreal means a lot more. To be surreal is to bridge the gap between the expected norms of everyday life with the vicious inconsistency of the imagination. For example, these two people are discussing work, an upcoming meeting, some recent promotions, etc., all the standard work stuff you'd expect, and when they see you, they ask for a 6-pack of Blue Moose, the all-natural energy beverage.
I drink it with every meal. Every single one.
And the best part, I don't work for these people, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I don't know why, it just kinda happens. Now I don't know about you guys, but this is exactly what my dreams are like. For example, a few weeks before recording this, I was having some crazy dream where I was trapped in some kind of horrific monster cavern, and I was being hunted by something. And it was terrifying, there was a scary atmosphere, it was a very creepy decor, etc. And then my uncle came in and we began discussing the decline of the middle class. A topic I have absolutely no knowledge on. Now, every individual element of that makes sense and I can explain just about all of them, but they have no business coming together and yet they did. That is peak surrealism, and the Norwood Suite emulates that perfectly. Anyway, I should probably talk about the actual gameplay because I've not covered that yet. Well, I've seen some people describe this as a walking simulator, but that isn't quite right. Walking simulators are usually very mechanically light and usually quite linear, and the Norwood Suite, while not being the most mechanically complex game, is neither of these. It's probably best to call it an adventure game, being somewhere in between The Vanishing of Ethan Carter and Penumbra Requiem in terms of gameplay. And your overall goal is to just kind of do things. Go with the flow. People will ask you for stuff, go and do it. I'd usually say this is an inconsistent and lazy form of story design, but here I absolutely adore it, because the game was designed with that in mind. And because it was intentional, it flows beautifully. One minute you're meddling with a Wi-Fi router, the next you're DJing in some extra-dimensional space, then you're making a sandwich, then you're fixing a piano, and none of it feels out of place, because all of it feels out of place. On the topic of things being surreal, this game has a wonderful sense of humor. It hits that perfect balance of realism, surrealism, and deadpan delivery, which just cracks me up. Like these hand wash signs. This sink is for hand washing only. Same here. Lunxus wireless router, operation manual and selected poems. Musk! And the humor doesn't stop with visual gags. There are some hilarious and subtle moments throughout the game. A recurring example of this is when you finish a task for someone, they often tell you to do another similar and specific task, which you never do. Not as in you're given an option, but the game physically does not allow you to do the task for them. For example, this woman asks you to find her calligraphy pens, and you do eventually come across them. But when you do, you physically cannot interact with them. The game's like, no, you've helped this person, move on. I don't know why, but that really tickles me. It's important to note the difference between surreal humor that this game displays and random humor, which the internet often mistakes for surreal humor. One is among the most meticulous types of comedy, and the other is garbage. But I understand that superficially the two can seem very similar because they're both centered on weird stuff happening. Random humor simply relies on shock value and surprise to get a laugh out of you, whereas surreal humor intentionally builds up your expectations by having everything else be recognizable or at the very least consistent, and then juxtaposes those expectations with something absurd. And often surreal humor will have something to say, and that can be as broad as a statement about the oddness of avant-garde fashion, or as specific as the overcomplication of instruction manuals. So to summarize, random humor is just the punchline, whereas surreal humor is the build-up, the punchline, and the message. But the best surreal stuff does more than make you laugh. It also freaks you out, and the Norwood Suite certainly does this. Let's go through a list of some of the more unsettling imagery you'll come across. The Silent Hill Room. The train line hellscape. These hands. Look at these goddamn hands. The red glow from beneath the locked doors. And the ominous black circle. But above all else, the elephant in the room. The fucking homunculus people with instruments for voices who you never see move and teleport when you're not looking, but then you do see them move and you wish you hadn't because god damn it, look at them! And without spoiling anything, the story also has some pretty disturbing elements. I think. It's pretty vague, it's hard to tell. And again, I mean that in the best possible way. And on the topic of things being vague, the combination of surrealism, obscurity, uneasiness, and confusion led to some weird actions on my end. Like, I genuinely spent some time trying to figure out why this pool noodle is over here, meanwhile all of its friends are over there. During this time, I'm being stared at by... and I don't question a goddamn thing about it. Creating meaning from the meaningless is a real skill, and I commend the developer for achieving it. And when I say developer, I don't mean company developer. I mean the individual developer who made this game. Yes, this is another one-man project. I've covered a different one before, that being Oulu, and that game was, well, that game was odd in less good ways than this.
And you know what? You can make it bigger, in case I show up too.
And I also mentioned in my videos on Oulu that it failed because it was too ambitious, and had it been more focused, it could have been something great. And proof of that is the Norwood Suite, a simple, focused, and deeply personal experience, which was clearly crafted with such care and passion. Had I elected to finish Oulu, it would have taken me around 20 hours total to beat it. The Norwood Suite took less than 2, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Playtime is not a reliable metric of quality. In fact, it's often the opposite. The Norwood Suite doesn't overstay its welcome. It brings you in, delivers a complete experience, says what it wants to say, and then ends. It has impeccable delivery. Now, I realize at this point in writing the script for this that I haven't really said anything negative about the Norwood Suite, so here's something. It takes a while to load. Now, I don't want to be too negative, so let's go back to the positives. The music. Good lord, I have to mention the goddamn music. It's wonderful. It's about as surreal as the rest of the game, and about as good as the rest of the game as well. It's been playing in the background of this video the whole time, and I don't know about you, but I just adore this. I can't put my finger on what genre it is. It's like electronic, but it's more specific. It's like dream trance. Dream trance? Is that a thing? Let's call it dream trance. And the way it's actually implemented in the game is pretty cool in itself, because rather than playing ambiently in the background like it has been in this video, the music plays from speakers that are physically in the game. And most of the speakers are playing different music, and because the speakers are stationary, this gives every area its own musical identity, which is a really neat way to do it. As you might be able to tell, I kinda like this game. And in case it wasn't obvious, I wholeheartedly recommend it to all of you. But I should mention that after I finished the Norwood Suite, I discovered that it's actually a sequel to another game by the same developer, the game called Off Peak, which is free to play on Steam, so if you want a taste of what the Norwood Suite's like, go and play Off Peak first. And to summarize this whole video, the Norwood Suite, good. Thanks for watching. Bye.